Hey guys, tonight we fall face first into the sea foam. You're standing barefoot on a black sand beach under a sky so thick with stars. It almost feels like the gods are watching you back. And maybe they are. Out in the waves, something bubbles. Not seaweed. Not driftwood. Something unnatural. A form rises from the surf slow, glowing, absolutely unfair. Skin like sunlight through rose petals. Hair that flows like silk dipped in honey. And nothing but a seashell to her name. Aphrodite, not just a goddess of love, the goddess. But don't let the romantic soundtrack fool you. Because she doesn't. Bring love like a Hallmark card. She brings it like a loaded gun. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know where you're listening. Drop your location and the local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey starts in chaos, as most divine dramas do. The world is young, still molten in places, and the gods are bickering. Like trust fund cousins at a will reading. One of them, Cronus, chops off his own father's junk, because why not, and hurls it into the sea. And from that awkward splash, Aphrodite is born. Not the daughter of love, but the fallout of a celestial castration. That's your first hint. She's not here to heal anything. She's here to set it all on fire and call it passion. When she steps onto land for the first time, the world literally blooms under her feet. Birds chirp, bees overachieve. Men and women forget their own names. And the other gods, oh, they panic. Because Aphrodite doesn't just enter the room. She alters gravitational fields. She makes marriage contracts irrelevant. She makes celibacy optional. You think you're immune until she looks at you. Then it's over. But here's the thing they don't tell you in Sunday school or Disney. Love, as wielded by Aphrodite, is not soft. It's not candlelit dinners and holding hands in autumn. It's obsession. It's compulsion. It's the chemical warfare of the gods. She doesn't shoot Cupid's arrow. She invented the damn arrow and made sure it hit just slightly to the left of sanity. She watches mortals like a producer on a reality show, nudging them into bad decisions with a smirk. And the gods? They're no better. Zeus himself, king of the skies, keeps his distance, because even he knows Aphrodite plays a different game. Not one of power or thunderbolts. One of desire, where you don't need an army to conquer, you just need someone to want what they can't have. Myth says the gods argued over who'd get to marry her. Makes sense. She's the divine equivalent of every school crush you never got over. But instead of choosing based on affection, respect, or, I don't know, consent, Zeus hands her over like a party favor to Hephaestus, the club-footed, soot-covered blacksmith of Olympus. This is either a peace treaty or a joke. And Aphrodite? She goes along with it barely. While Hephaestus is welding thunderbolts and fixing cosmic plumbing, she's doing laps around the Mediterranean collecting lovers like Pokemon. Ares, the god of war, is her favorite, which checks out. Because nothing turns her on quite like violence, chaos, and a good pair of abs. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're still on that beach, remember? And she's still standing. There, naked and undefeated. Somewhere behind her, the gods are already scheming. Hermes is taking mental notes. Hera's filing grievances. Apollo's composing simp songs on his lyre. And Aphrodite? She just smiles because she knows. She knows that from this moment forward, every story worth telling will orbit her gravitational pull. Wars will be fought in her name. Cities will rise and fall. Men will leave their kingdoms. Women will burn theirs. And all of it, every juicy bit, will come back to this. The power to make someone need you, not want. Not like need, like air. Like water. Like sleep they'll never get again. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite was worshipped more out of devotion or sheer fear. It's hard to say. When your goddess can ruin your marriage, your harvest, and your entire bloodline because you forgot her festival, the line between love and hostage situation blurs real fast. Her cult spread like wildfire: Cyprus, Corinth, Sicily, each adapting her image to local tastes. Sometimes she's a nurturing mother, sometimes a seductress on a blood-stained throne. Always beautiful, always dangerous. Here's a fringe detail you'll like. In some early sculptures, Aphrodite was depicted with a beard. Yep, the artists weren't confused, they were making a point. Love isn't binary, it's a spectrum. And in her, it could be soft or hard, male or female, god or mortal. A shapeshifter, a heartbreaker, a concept with legs. Long, perfectly moisturized legs. Tonight, you're going to follow her trail, not just through Olympus, but through bedrooms, battlefields, and broken empires. And you probably won't survive this without emotional damage. Because Aphrodite doesn't do tidy endings. She does cliffhangers, affairs, ghosting. She's the queen of "it's complicated." But she's also the thread that runs through every poem, every blush, every midnight text you swore you wouldn't send. Love as weapon, desire as plague. And behind it all, dash her dot. So now Aphrodite is married. Technically, legally, in a way that makes no one happy. Especially not her. Hephaestus, her new husband, is the least glamorous god on the block, lame in one leg. Soot-streaked, living in a volcano. Surrounded by anvils and robot assistants he made himself because literally no one wants to hang out with him. But he's brilliant, and the gods owe him. So when it comes time to deal with the Aphrodite situation, because she is very much a situation, Zeus plays matchmaker, hoping that sticking her with the least threatening bachelor will stabilize Olympus. It does not. It creates something worse: boredom. And you know what boredom leads to when you're the goddess of sex and beauty. Affairs, plural, rapid fire, no filter. And the first name on that very long list? Ares, tall, broody, always shirtless. He's everything Hephaestus isn't, and Aphrodite doesn't even pretend to resist. Their affair becomes so notorious that even mortals start whispering about it in temple murals. And they don't just sleep together, they play house. In some myths, they have children, Phobos and Deimos, literal fear and terror, who ride into battle with Ares. That's right. When this couple gets frisky, the result is psychological warfare. But Hephaestus isn't a fool. He notices the late nights, the scent of blood and cologne, the way Aphrodite glows a little too hard after her walks. So he does what any wronged husband with divine metallurgy skills would do. He builds a trap, a nearly invisible golden net, fine as spider, silk but unbreakable, and strings it above their bed. Then he waits. Sure enough, the next time Aphrodite and Ares decide to play godly twister, down comes the net. They're caught mid-act, naked and tangled, frozen in a tableau that screams, "Do not disturb." Hephaestus summons the rest of the gods to come look. That's the level of petty we're working with, divine revenge by public shaming. The male gods show up and laugh themselves sick. The goddesses conveniently decline. Even in scandal, there are boundaries. But Aphrodite, she's unbothered. She knows what she is. She doesn't apologize. She never flinches. And soon enough, the net is lifted, and she walks out the front door like a supermodel leaving a courthouse. No regrets. Just smirks. Still, if you think her affairs are limited to gods, think again. Aphrodite has a thing for mortals, dangerous, fragile, wide-eyed. Humans who are always just one kiss away from ruin. There's Anchises, a shepherd minding his own business when she shows up disguised as a mortal woman. They hook up in a cave. Afterwards, she reveals who she really is, and he loses the ability to speak for a week. Later, he brags about it anyway. And Zeus strikes him with a lightning bolt because, well, loose lips sink myths. There's also Fiend, a boatman so average he could disappear into any crowd until Aphrodite, in disguise again, gives him a potion that turns him supernaturally attractive. Suddenly every woman in Lesbos is writing him poetry. One of them, the poet Sappho, becomes obsessed. And when he rejects her, she throws herself off a cliff. Historians still argue whether that death was real or metaphorical, whether she jumped for love or whether later writers dramatized her bisexual heartbreak. Either way, Fiend becomes another cautionary tale. When Aphrodite upgrades your dating profile, there's always fine print. Now here's your fringe fact for the night. Some versions of Aphrodite's story say she carried a magical girdle, a kind of celestial belt that made anyone desire or anyone wearing it. Think of it like the universe's first thirst trap. Except it works on gods, mortals, and probably small woodland creatures. Hera borrows it at one point to seduce Zeus during a particularly frosty marital Cold War. And yes, it works. They vanish behind a cloud for what ancient texts politely call a private conversation, and the war they were fighting pauses for just long enough for the world to get weirdly peaceful. That's Aphrodite's influence, even when she's not present. Her accessories are causing truce-inducing hookups. Love as diplomacy. Lust as strategy. You get the idea. Hephaestus, for all his pain, never really wins this war. He creates Marvel's armor, jewelry, thrones that trap people, but he never captures Aphrodite's heart, because she doesn't give it away. She loans it, maybe on occasion, in candlelit fragments. But she keeps it locked somewhere unreachable, wrapped in silk and barbed wire. You start to realize she isn't here to fall in love. She is love, not the soft kind. The kind that floods, disrupts, turns kings into poets and generals into fools. And when you live with that much power, fidelity is a joke. Monogamy is a paper cage. Still, the affair with Ares won't be the last time she uses her body as leverage. Not even close. You'll see, she's got plans, maps, maybe even a kill list. And all of it starts with this simple, undeniable truth. No one resists her for long. Not gods. Not men. And certainly not you. And just like that, love goes to war. Not metaphorically, literally. Aphrodite's fingerprints are all over one of the bloodiest, pettiest, most overanalyzed conflicts in mythic history, the Trojan War. You remember the story. Or at least the sanitized school version wooden horse. Achilles' heel, Brad Pitt looking moody. But peel back the epic poetry, and there it is, nestled at the root of it all like a poisonous seed, a beauty contest. No, seriously. The war that killed thousands and toppled an empire starts with three goddesses arguing about who's the prettiest. And when it comes to toxic pageantry, Aphrodite never loses. It begins with a wedding, the only one Aphrodite wasn't invited to. Big mistake. The goddess Eris, who basically invented chaos, crashes the party and tosses a golden apple into the crowd. It's labeled, "To the fairest." That's all it takes. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite lock eyes and start circling each other like reality. TV finalists before the last rose is handed out. They demand judgment. Zeus refuses because even he knows better than to rank goddesses based on looks, so the job gets outsourced to a mortal, Paris, Prince of Troy, whose main qualifications are good hair and zero spine. Now imagine this poor man standing on a hillside as three divine beings appear before him, each offering a bribe more outrageous than the last. Hera offers power, make him king of all Europe and Asia. Athena offers wisdom and victory in war. Aphrodite, she offers sex. Specifically, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris doesn't even hesitate. He takes the bribe, gives her the apple, and signs a death warrant for his entire city. The woman in question is Helen of Sparta, famously face, that launched 1,000 ships. Helen, who also happens to be married. Aphrodite doesn't care. She snaps her fingers, Helen falls in love with Paris, and boom, they elope. Not to Vegas, to Troy, And that, dear listener, is how a cosmic beauty pageant turns into a 10-year war. Historians still argue whether the story of Helen was ever based on a real woman, or if she's just an ancient thought experiment in how desire ruins everything. Either way, Aphrodite is right there at the epicenter, playing matchmaker and chaos agent. She protects Paris during the war, sometimes literally sweeping him off the battlefield like a mom rescuing her kid from dodgeball. She intervenes when Helen hesitates, whispering sweet nothings and reminders of divine obligation. And when Troy begins to crumble under the weight of its own romantic mistakes, Aphrodite doesn't blink. She's already watching the next story unfold. Now for tonight's scandalous sidebar. Did you know that the ancient Spartans trained their young brides not just in wifely duties, but in seduction tactics allegedly blessed by Aphrodite? According to Peter Webb's The Erotic Spirit Through History, some girls were taught to dress like boys' short hair, simple tunics to ease the transition for their warrior husbands, who spent most of their time in same-sex military barracks. Aphrodite wasn't just the goddess of beauty, she was the goddess of adaptability. Love, as she wielded it, didn't obey binary rules. It bent itself to the needs of the moment, and sometimes the needs were very specific. Meanwhile, back in Troy, the body count rises. Achilles kills Hector. Patroclus dies. Odysseus schemes. And Aphrodite? She keeps her distance, letting the mortals bleed out the consequences of her golden apple hustle. But she's not entirely absent. She even takes a wound. Diomedes, one of the Greek warriors, stabs her on the battlefield when she tries to rescue her son Aeneas. The cut isn't deep, but it's enough. She cries out, drops her boy, and flees back to Olympus, furious that anyone would dare touch her, hurt her. And this is where you get a rare glimpse of her vulnerability. For a moment, she's not the untouchable seductress. She's just a mother in pain, embarrassed and enraged. It doesn't last long. She heals. She hardens. She gets even more creative. The war ends in ruin. Troy burns. Helen goes back to her husband as if nothing happened, which, depending on the version you read, is either romantic or deeply unsettling. Paris dies. The Greeks suffer curses, shipwrecks, and divine wrath for the next decade. And Aphrodite? She walks away untouched, her hands technically clean. She didn't pull a sword or light a pyre. She just tilted the scales of desire slightly, whispered in the right ear, promised the wrong thing. That's how she works. Not as a soldier, but as a story catalyst. You start to realize something darker about her power. It doesn't just seduce. It justifies. Every bad decision made in the name of love, every betrayal, every crime of passion, feels like it makes sense in her glow. Like, of course she started a war. Have you seen Helen? And so, mortals keep falling into the same trap, confusing obsession for fate, mistaking lust for destiny. And Aphrodite just watches it all, eyes half-lidded, lips curled in a smile that doesn't reach the edges. What happens when a goddess falls in love with a man she can't keep? The answer is blood. Always blood. You see, Aphrodite doesn't do slow burns or safe choices. Her lovers are lightning rods, charged, tragic, and usually doomed. She doesn't fall for boring. She falls for men like Adonis. And that's where your next descent begins. Imagine a boy so beautiful the woods blush when he walks by. His skin is sun-drenched gold, his eyes the exact color of freshly turned earth. And when he moves, time stutters. Mortal, fragile, completely unqualified for divine attention. And yet Aphrodite wants him, needs him, claims him. Not like a partner, but like a secret she's trying to hide from the sky. She tucks him away in a forest glade, shields him from the other gods, begs him not to hunt anything too dangerous. He nods, smiles, immediately goes off to track a boar. This is the part where you cover your eyes. The boar gores him. Some say it's a random accident. Others whisper it was Ares jealous, shape-shifted, raging. Either way, Adonis dies in Aphrodite's arms, blood spilling across her thighs, staining the ground red. Where it touches, a flower blooms. The anemone, paper thin, always short-lived. Just like him. And that, dear listener, is Aphrodite's curse. She can make you desirable, worshipped, untouchable, but she can't keep you alive. The closer she holds someone, the more likely they are to shatter. Like Sisyphus with his boulder, she lifts love to its peak only to watch it fall, again and again. Her relationships aren't romances, they're test cases. Social experiments with a body count. And the mortals, they never learn. They chase. Her favor like gamblers at a rigged table, knowing full well the house always wins. But Aphrodite doesn't just collect lovers, she manipulates them like chess pieces. There's Phaedra, a queen who falls in love with her stepson. Not because she wants to, because Aphrodite makes her. A punishment, some say, for Phaedra's family's lack of worship. Others claim it's a warning. Ignore the goddess of love, and she'll send you cravings that rot from the inside. The story ends in scandal and suicide, of course, because that's the through line in Aphrodite's favorite dramas. Love is never clean. It's messy, public, unforgiving. Now for tonight's fringe detail. In one temple ritual honoring Aphrodite in Cyprus, her followers would offer clay figurines of genitals, male and female, as tokens of devotion. Not hidden, not shameful. Just placed openly on altars like cupcakes at a PTA meeting. Scholars still debate whether these offerings were meant to invoke fertility, ward off disease, or simply flatter the goddess with body-positive charm. Either way, it tells you something about her worshippers. They understood that to honor Aphrodite properly, you had to show your whole self. No filters. No euphemisms. And then there's the story of Mira. She's cursed again by Aphrodite to fall in love with her own father. There are many versions, none of them gentle. Some say Aphrodite was angry at Mira's mother for boasting that her daughter was more beautiful than the goddess herself. A dangerous comparison, always. So Aphrodite doesn't strike down the boastful mother. She corrupts the daughter. Mira disguises herself, seduces her father in the dark, and when he learns the truth, he tries to kill her. She flees, pregnant, and eventually transforms into a myrrh tree. From that tree, her son is born Adonis. Yes, that Adonis. The beautiful boy whose death nearly breaks Aphrodite. So the goddess causes the wound and weeps over the consequence. You see the pattern now. She's not a villain, not exactly. She's just the kind of love that devours and then mourns. She bites, then kisses the bruise. Historians still argue whether Aphrodite's myths were moral warnings or mythic reflections of real social anxieties, fear of female sexuality, of generational curses, of desire unbound by law. But to you, lying here in the dark, it's simpler. She's the embodiment of that first stomach drop crush. The one you know won't end well but chase anyway. She's the fire you lean into, even as your eyelashes start to singe. And the lovers? They keep lining up. Not because they don't see the wreckage behind her, but because they do. Because there's something seductive about being the next name in her myth. Even if you end up a flower, a corpse, or a cautionary tale. Now picture this. You're walking into a temple. Not the cold, echoing kind with incense and muttered prayers, but something warmer, more intimate. There are rose petals on the floor. The air smells like cinnamon and sweat. Women in translucent robes move through columns carved with erotic scenes, their laughter mixing with soft music. No one here is ashamed. No one whispers. You're in the house of Aphrodite, where worship means pleasure and piety comes with a price tag. This isn't about faith, it's about control. Because love, as she orchestrates it, isn't some passive emotion. It's a power structure. And Aphrodite? She's the CEO. Welcome to the cult economy. Aphrodite's temples didn't just Survive, they thrived because they sold what everyone wanted and no one could hold: desire. In cities like Corinth, she wasn't just adored, she was institutionalized. Her temples were staffed with sacred courtesans, known as hieroduloi, women and sometimes men who offered sex as spiritual service. Pilgrims would come to the temple, leave offerings, and experience something between a rite and a rendezvous. Scholars debate whether these practices were fully transactional or symbolic, but the point stands: under Aphrodite's gaze, the line between worship and indulgence blurred to near invisibility. These courtesans weren't treated like common prostitutes. Many were educated, trained in music, rhetoric, fashion. They weren't just bodies. They were conversation pieces, political players, confidants of kings. One famous example is Rhodopis, a courtesan so admired in ancient Greece that legend claims she once tossed a sandal into the air, and an eagle carried it across Egypt to drop it in a pharaoh's lap, leading to her becoming queen. Sounds like myth, maybe it is, but it reveals something crucial. Under Aphrodite's domain, beauty could become destiny. A single gesture could flip your fate. One smile could rewrite your social class. This is also where we meet women who owned their sexuality as capital. Like Phryne, a courtesan so rich from her admirers that when Thebes needed rebuilding, she offered to fund the reconstruction on the condition that a plaque credit her, not the city's leaders. And the thing is, she probably could have done it. At her trial for impiety, when words failed her, she simply removed her robe. The judges took one look and acquitted her on the grounds that such divine beauty must be innocent. Imagine winning a court case with your torso. Aphrodite would have been proud. Now here's a fringe tidbit for your pillow tonight. In some early Hellenic cults, Aphrodite was worshipped not just with symbols of love, but of war. Helmets placed beside mirrors, swords next to doves. Because to the ancients, love and violence weren't opposites. They were siblings. And Aphrodite, especially in her eastern forms, like Ishtar and Astarte, was both lover and destroyer. You could leave her temple either glowing or gutted. Often both. Historians still argue whether these sacred sex rituals were empowering or exploitative. Were these courtesans priestesses in control of their bodies, or pawns in a patriarchal pantheon? Truth is, it's murky. Some women rose to power through these roles. Others likely had no choice. But under Aphrodite's rule, even ambiguity became seductive. Power wrapped in silk. Consent negotiated in the dark. But here's the twist. Not all of Aphrodite's influence was sensual. Some of it was deeply political. She was the goddess invoked at weddings, of course, but also in treaties, in fertility rites, in childbirth prayers. Want your crops to grow, your children to live, your enemy to forgive you? Better make an offering. She didn't just own bedrooms, she owned outcomes. And love in her arsenal wasn't just emotional, it was transactional. An alliance, a surrender, a weapon. She even had festivals. Like Aphrodisia, a celebration involving purification rituals, offerings of incense and flowers, and symbolic washing of her statue in the sea. But don't be fooled by the sweetness of the name. These events weren't just about affection. They were about resetting the balance. Wiping the slate clean from a year of jealousies, betrayals, seductions gone wrong. Because worshipping Aphrodite meant acknowledging that love is messy, that lust complicates, that beauty burns. You start to see how her image wasn't always nude or delicate. In some temples, she wore armor, a shield. She was Aphrodite, Arrhea Aphrodite of the battlefield. Because seduction is war, and intimacy, when twisted just right, can leave deeper scars than any spear. In these forms, she wasn't asking to be desired. She was commanding it. No flowers. Just force dots, so when you hear goddess of love, don't think rose-colored valentines. Think thrones of bone and silk. Think negotiations whispered in the dark. Think women who wore gold chains around their ankles and still held kings in the palm of their hands. That's the cult of Aphrodite. Not love as feeling, but love as leverage. Now imagine this. You're sitting in the Roman Senate, and love walks in wearing a breastplate. That's Venus Aphrodite's Latin makeover sashaying through marble halls like she owns the Republic. Because, technically, she does. The Romans didn't just import Aphrodite. They upgraded her. Rebranded her like a startup with better PR. They gave her a family line, a purpose, a military strategy. Venus Genetrix, mother of Rome, ancestor of emperors, state-sanctioned sex symbol. Julius Caesar himself claimed descent from her through her son Aeneas, the one she cradled during the Trojan War. That's right. Rome wasn't just built on conquest. It was built on a one-night stand, a divine hookup that turned into political propaganda. And once Venus became the empire's official goddess, she stopped playing coy. Her temples doubled as social clubs. Her imagery was printed on coins, carved into military standards, and whispered in lovers' ears as they toasted her name in wine-soaked feasts. No longer just a goddess of emotion, Venus became a corporate sponsor of imperial ambition. You start to see how love, in Roman hands, becomes weaponized not just emotionally, but diplomatically. Venus is invoked before battles, yes, but also during peace treaties. She's the soft edge of the sword, the kiss after the conquest. She doesn't just make soldiers lust for victory, she makes citizens lust for stability, unity, order. And that's when it gets clever. Because the Romans, unlike the Greeks, weren't content with chaotic gods. They preferred their deities functional. Venus had to serve a purpose. So she became everything at once. Goddess of gardens, of victory, of family lineage, of civic pride. She wasn't narrowed down. She was expanded, industrialized, broadcast. Even Augustus Caesar's heir built his entire reign around her image. His temple to Venus Genetrix was more than a place of worship. It was a branding strategy. Walk in, and you weren't just praying. You were pledging allegiance to the divine bloodline that ruled your taxes. Here's your fringe nugget for the night. In some lesser-known Roman cults, Venus was paired with Priapus, the rustic fertility god. Known mostly for his disproportionately enthusiastic anatomy. Statues of him, often tucked into gardens, served as protective talismans against theft, bad harvests, and possibly awkward dinner parties. These weren't subtle sculptures. They were deliberately shocking. Romans believed a little bit of scandal kept the evil spirits away. Aphrodite's laugh is probably still echoing somewhere from that design choice. But let's zoom in on a more delicate relationship. Venus and Mars. In Rome, they weren't just having an affair, they were mythologized as divine balance. Passion and aggression. Desire and discipline. Their union symbolized not chaos, but cosmic order. Venus tempers Mars' rage. Mars energizes Venus' languor. Together, they represent the dual engine of empire. Seduce when you can, conquer when you must. And through their mythical children like Harmonia, goddess of harmony, the message is clear. Out of passion and war comes peace. Even if that peace is laced with ulterior motives, historians still argue whether the Roman worship of Venus was more about control or comfort. Did the emperors elevate her because they genuinely adored her, or because she made a useful mascot? For soft power? Either way, her temples were always full. Her festivals, like Vinalia Urbana, weren't just about wine. They were about women, flirtation, renewal. And like everything Roman, they had rules. No cult was more carefully structured than Venus. Even love had a chain of command. But Venus also leaked into private lives. Roman women often prayed to her, not just for husbands, but for beauty, charm, and social leverage. Aphrodite had always offered these gifts, but Venus made them mainstream. In Roman fashion, her symbols were everywhere on jewelry, on pottery, in mosaics depicting her rising from the sea on a seashell, surrounded by cherubs blowing kisses and dolphins doing synchronized ballet. It was kitsch, it was gorgeous, and it was propaganda. You weren't just hanging a painting. You were aligning your home with divine charm, hoping, maybe, that by placing her image above your bed, your next night would be a little more blessed, or at least less awkward. So now Aphrodite has become Venus, not diminished, evolved. No longer the unpredictable wildcard of Olympus. She's now a functioning deity within a vast machine. Love with a user manual. Lust with a political agenda. She smiles from coins and watches empires rise, not through war, but through weddings, dynasties, and carefully posed portraits of Mother Goddess in air. She's no longer just a goddess. She's a legacy. A living reminder that desire can build things, not just burn them. That seduction, in the right hands, can be just as effective as steel. And beneath it, all beneath the marble, the parades, the temple incense, you can still feel her original pulse. The seafoam girl. The goddess who steps out of the surf, naked and unstoppable. Still watching, still scheming, still in control. Picture this. The lights dim, the paintings fade to sepia, and Aphrodite, once a goddess dripping in myrrh and strategy, suddenly becomes a problem. Not a deity to be adored, but a dangerous idea to be rebranded or erased. You've entered the medieval era, where incense no longer smells like sex, and love is expected to come with guilt. The church has arrived, and it is not amused. Venus, goddess of desire, gets a PR downgrade. No more temple courtesans, no more public festivals. She's painted over, rewritten, sometimes quite literally cast as a demon in stained glass, or as a cautionary tale in sermons about moral decay. In this world, the body is not a temple, it's a trap. And Aphrodite? She's now the bait. Welcome to the age where pleasure becomes sin and beauty gets buried under layers of shame. But she doesn't disappear. She evolves. Aphrodite, now too scandalous to be a goddess, is folded into folktales and whispered through poetry. She becomes every femme fatale in every moral tale. Eve with an apple, Salome with a veil, sirens on the rocks pulling sailors to their deaths. Her stories stop being about empowerment and start being about punishment. Desire, once divine, is now a test, and failure comes with fire. Yet the memory of her power lingers. In medieval art, even saints sometimes look suspiciously seductive. In the margins of illuminated manuscripts, you'll find doodles of naked women riding fish or wielding flowers shaped like vulvas. Aphrodite is still there, just wearing a disguise. She's in the ink. She's in the jokes that monks weren't supposed to write. Because even when repressed, she refuses to be deleted. Fast forward to the Renaissance, and suddenly she's back, but cleaned up, scrubbed, airbrushed. The rebirth of classical thought means Aphrodite gets to come out of exile, but only as long as she behaves. Now she's a muse, not a menace. Botticelli paints her emerging from a shell again in The Birth of Venus, pale and ethereal, surrounded by gentle breezes and silk-draped nymphs. No scandal here, just tasteful nudity, like a fancy perfume. Add, she's no longer wielding desire like a blade. She's draped in it like chiffon. And everyone breathes a little easier because this version of Aphrodite doesn't speak. She just inspires. Paintings, sonnets, secret fantasies in powdered courts. Historians still argue whether this sanitized Venus was progress or erasure. Was it a celebration of beauty or a neutering of power? After all, the Renaissance loved representing women, but rarely let them speak. Aphrodite became more symbol than force. She was allowed to exist only in oil paint and polished marble, not in policy or passion. But here's the secret. Even in this softened form, she slipped past the gatekeepers. She appeared in the eyes Of muses, in the smirks of courtesans, in the whispers behind lace fans at masquerades. People still knew what she stood for. They just learned to say it in Latin. Now for a fringe detail. You might have missed in art class. Many of the Renaissance nudes modeled on Venus were actually mistresses of the painters or patrons, so that ideal beauty, it had a name, an address, and probably a very complicated love life. Which means that even in her most sanitized form, Aphrodite still worked through flesh and flirtation. She made the leap from altar to canvas without losing her bite. And what about literature? Oh, she's everywhere. Shakespeare's Venus is seductive, manipulative, and absolutely unapologetic. In Venus and Adonis, she practically throws herself at the boy, who refuses her, only to die shortly after. Sound familiar? It's the old pattern. Love as curse, beauty as danger, rejection as fatal flaw, and yet she's magnetic. Readers aren't meant to like her, they're meant to want her. That's how she survives. By the time the Enlightenment rolls around, she becomes more abstract. Philosophers debate love, passion, and morality while quietly staring at busts of Venus in their salons. She shifts again, this time into allegory. She's not a goddess now, she's an ideal, a figure of speech, a metaphor for longing in a world trying very hard to appear rational. But you can still feel her heat under the powdered wigs and polite prose. She's there when someone writes about uncontrollable passions or woman's dangerous charm. Aphrodite is like water. Whatever vessel you pour her into, she reshapes to fill it. You start to realize the most dangerous version of her isn't the naked goddess with a lover in every port. It's the one you can't see clearly, the one hidden. In language, in culture, in the unconscious rules about who gets to want what and how loudly. The sanitized Venus, the quiet one, she's the most lethal of all. Because she convinces you love is safe, predictable, containable, and when you believe that, she strikes.